What's going on, gamers? We've got an interesting topic here over at Windows Central Gaming. I've seen other posts, but this is more in depth and layer. And we got some comments we need to highlight as well. So in this article, we're talking about Sony and third-party, expansion, meaning putting their games on PC mainly, and then partially putting something on Xbox like Helldivers, you know what I mean? Marathons also come in there too, and whatever games they put on Switch or Switch 2, but that's not that much. But mainly this is about PC, and then a little bit about Xbox, which has to be included since they put Helldivers there. So it says since Sony has started releasing its games on platforms that aren't the PlayStation, new data suggests it has brought in over 2 billion. So when you look at that, you're like, oh yeah, man, this is amazing. You know what I mean? Sony needs that. You know what I mean? And it's going to get interesting because you're going to find out what this means compared to what they made over the same period, outside of that, which is 98%, 99%. You see what I mean? Living proves that for the companies making games, exclusivity is leaving valuable revenue on the table. I would say not necessarily because Nintendo's not hurting at all. And Sony doesn't really need that. But what Sony needed to do was do that. And I'm not saying I wouldn't want people to experience other games. I think when it comes to live service and stuff like Helldivers, that has to be day one. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about first party. And the reason why I think this was good for Sony is because that helped them recoup what they lost for canceling those games. You see what I mean? And even prior to that, there's nothing wrong with testing that if you realize it doesn't hurt your base and you're still doing almost the same thing. Plus, you're bringing in that on the side. It's just more money and more business profit, and that's what business is about anyways, right? Except like when you're thinking more along the lines of playing the game the way you play it with exclusives and all that type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, there's more revenue on the table for sure. But with somebody like Microsoft, they have to do that to survive, or they're done. There will be no Xbox. You know what I mean? Microsoft would shut it down. Sony doesn't have to do that. Nintendo never has to do it, and they never will because this is who they are. So Hunter comes down here, and we got the article to read. So there's some stuff to talk about here. Actually, you know what? Let's go to Crap Gamer's post. This is what he said. Leaving out the fact that this information is covering 7 years and equals only 1% of Sony's revenue. Let's say if you wanted to be generous, 1.5%. This you want to be more generous, 2%. It's not worth killing your console and brand over 1%. Crap Gamer has said something intelligent here. What he's saying is that you don't have to do that. You still make 98 or 99% of your revenue and income and success without PC, and you don't need Xbox. You're just doing that because Sony was trying to make as much money as possible. And like I said, recoup anything they lost from live service. And plus, when it comes to live service and you want to be successful, there's nothing wrong with having as much people on your game as possible when it's something that's supposed to be up with the most people to stay alive, like a casino, and you got microtransactions and all that other stuff running. So I think when it comes to those games, it's a no-brainer. They need to be day and date on PC and Xbox and even Nintendo if you can, like live service games. Now, when it comes to single-player games, no, I wouldn't do it. You don't need to do that. So that's basically what he's trying to say. Like, there's no reason for Sony to ever go day and date. You still need your power on your console. There's going to be hybrid, of course. So I think they'll still put games on Steam. I'm not trying to say they should stop that. That's up to them if they want to make their own app too outside of that. But basically, what Crap Gamer is saying is 100% correct. Like, that's where Sony is like, I could say they're in a good position and they have so much brand loyalty and they built it up for a while to where they were doing that, but it didn't kill PlayStation. It didn't kill their market. It didn't do anything. Though people wanted to push that narrative, like, look, they're still doing better than ever. We're talking about results. And they're still going to hit their 100-something million. And they've been doing that for years now. So it didn't tank them down. They know what they're doing. Unlike Microsoft. That's a fact. Hunter says this is a much more layered topic than this applies. PlayStation made over 155 billion since. That's what I'm saying. So you get the 155 billion compared to the 2. What is that? Yeah, it's like 98%. You see me? It's nothing. So just over 1% of revenue, a rounding error. Of that 2 billion, the overwhelming majority is PC. Yeah, because Xbox wasn't getting PlayStation games. There are also numerous brand impacts to multi-platform approach. Diluting your brand, losing fans to competing platforms, who then reap the 30% store revenues. It's far from a straightforward, leaving valuable revenue on the table for a platform brand like Sony who wants and needs to maintain their platform. Yeah, their ecosystem, which is not reliant off of Windows and not reliant off of PC. They don't need that. Like Steam needs PC and it needs Windows. You see what I mean? Because it's mostly integrated into that. Whereas Nintendo and Sony stand on their own. Xbox's situation is completely different. Their hardware is tanking. They bought two major publishers and have a high software output, much of which is losing standing cross-platform franchises. They killed their market with Game Pass. They have nothing standing on their own. So it makes complete logical sense for Xbox to port everywhere. Yes, they have to. For survivability. Like, they need that. Whereas, like, you see Sony's like, dude, 98, 99% of my success, even with doing that, is over here. So what are you really doing for me? If you're just a 1%, I can just drop you off. That's a fact. They can. Except I wouldn't do that for live service. That's how... See what I mean? This is what I try to say. Like, that's how healthy the PlayStation and Nintendo ecosystems are on their own. They don't need something outside of themselves. They're doing it because they just want to make the extra money. That's it. So PlayStation has a very different strategic approach and should decide more carefully their porting approach. 100%. Because they have a lot at stake on there. It's not like PlayStation even down to 80% and Sony's worried, man, we had a 20% drop. They got 20% of our success. Dude, it's like 1%. Like I said, even if we want to give you 1.5. What is that? That's nothing. So this guy said, nice try. You missed the part that this was achieved 4 to 6 years, mostly on PC. And it's like, yeah, it kind of comes off as an Xbox fanboy article. Where it's like you're trying to include Xbox in there, but it's like they don't need them at all. They don't do much for them. They can literally just be like, I don't ever have to put anything on there again. I just did that because let's make some extra money. This is about Sony benefiting themselves more as a publisher. But they don't need it, though. Microsoft needs it. It is a deep need. So this guy says, how many years is that 2 billion across? My expectations for this blog site is low, but come on. And guys, this is the stuff that we have to talk about because it's very true. Where it's like, yeah, but in all those years, they made 155 billion in their own ecosystem. So it's like, no brainer. So like this article is going to come in and say that, where it's like, you know, unless you've been stuck in a Fallout bunker for the last few years, you might have noticed that both Microsoft and Sony putting their first-party games on platforms other than their own. Yeah, but Microsoft's doing that day and date, though. And it's been on PC day and date in every single game imaginable to survive and make up fake monthly active users and all that. Sony's not doing any of that. Their stuff is real, just like Nintendo's. So Microsoft is definitely the leader. No, they failed, so they have to do that. They're not a leader. They're terrible at leading. They destroyed everything, even Windows 11. And they have to recover that. No, they're not a leader. They're terrible. They're a greedy, profit-hungry, moronic company. So no. Talk about putting its own content in other places than Xbox. See, that's what I mean? It's like, you're just being a fanboy because it's like, no. They failed miserably, so they have to cuck out. And Sony's doing that because they just want to make extra money on the side, but Sony does not have to do that. So... to make the point, Derek Strickland with Tweaktown post on X, Sony has made at least $2.3 billion from selling first-party games and content on PC. Literally, this is just PC. Xbox barely just got Helldivers. It's like, yeah, but that's nothing compared to what they're doing elsewhere. They just want to recoup that extra money. That's why, like, you know, when you go to post like this, it's like, but why did you leave out the important factor right here, what they really made in contrast, and then do the math here. See, you got to give people the full picture, or it looks like you're trying to paint something in favor because your brand is losing so bad. You want to make it seem like Sony is following Microsoft and Microsoft is leading this way. It's like, no. No, they're failing miserably, so they have to appear like that's happening, but it's all bullshit. Everybody knows it too. So this is where this came in. Like I said, is that really chump change it to any of us? Like, no, but if you really look at the reality, it is. So from his article a bit ago, Sony reclassified how it reports earnings for its PlayStation division, adding in another segment called Other Software. As per Sony, the Other Software segment is defined as revenue from sales of first-party titles, including add-on content on platforms other than PlayStation consoles. His source comes from Sony's Q3 earnings in it. They report that their earnings from the other segments have reached a staggering $2.37 billion. That's right. Sony has made billions bringing games to Steam and Xbox alike. Cool. So that's a lot of moolah, yeah, but not in contrast to what they're doing in their own ecosystem. Money that will make Sony think twice before not releasing their games on other platforms. No, it's just live service. Take, for example, the recent announcements of Horizon Hunter Gatherings, which is coming to both PlayStation and Windows PC, because it's going to flop. If not, man, you better put that there. Second game looks mid as hell. Tony's looking at this as a perfect opportunity to gather some easy cash for the offers, for the coffers. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Easy cash, because that game does not look like it's going to be successful. While this won't be the first time Sony has simultaneously released a game on multiple platforms, I'm willing to bet we'll begin to see more games coming to multiple platforms. And if they do, you're not going to see me hating. I'm just saying that the way this is trying to be painted and the way they're trying to make it seem like Sony needs to do that or they're not going to survive, it's like, come on, man, get out of here. That's a bunch of bullcrap. We already seen it. It's 1% or 1.5%. And if you want to have a golden day, 2%, if you can even get that, you see? So look at the numbers of MLB, the show. That makes sense. It's a sports game. Had when the game was simultaneously released on Game Pass with a mass influx of players, microtransactions were going hot off the racks, although this is anecdotal. One of my best friends was spending hundreds of hours every year on the game and its packs. And then basically more to come. It's written in the past that Sony is crazy for not launching their games on PC day and date, and they'll be looking to generate more income from PC releases, if not more on Xbox. Why wouldn't they? At this point, they can pick and choose which games to bring to Xbox and PC while maintaining a veneer of exclusivity, since Xbox has given up entirely on the idea because they don't have a choice. So the only hitch in these plans has been Sony's recent cancellations of gas games. That's what I'm saying. They wanted to go make this $2 billion over here because of that, and that just basically, oh, thanks, because nothing happened then except the damage to my reputation, which I've already recovered. But hello, 155 billion still, more than ever in all time, because how busted microtransactions are in third-party vampire support. It's ridiculous. Whereas Nintendo's like 90-some% of their success is their games. Whole different ballpark there. That's why I said they're in a league of their own, and they can't compete with them. Because you can't have that type of success where all your charge, all your success from the beginning of the gaming industry back in the 80s all the way to now is you and your first party. And you have multiple devices releasing, dominating in the handheld big time, and you were doing well in the console industry, and that was you doing first party consistently, yearly, that whole time. Nobody else has done that. The closest ever in a little time window was Sega. But other than that, it's like, no, you can't mess with them when you want to talk about the whole resume all the way here to now in a combination of hardware and software simultaneously first party, game over. Not even close. But Sony does great things in a different way by being kind of like the open third-party PC console in the market with their exclusives too and money hats and being able to have the hardware that people want to get the settings that they always want. And they have that good overall balance of getting a ton and more games in that spectrum, and everything can be playable on there. You know what I mean? We're just looking at everything intelligently here and being honest, that's how it works. But if you want to talk about who's top dog, if I'm comparing Sony to Nintendo and Nintendo to Xbox, it's like, okay, I'm talking publishing and I'm talking development and I'm talking total hardware and software. That means you only. Don't grab no third party. You don't want to play that game because you're going to be like, yeah, it's a blowout. Metacritic, all that. Yeah, no, it doesn't come close. So that's my thing with that. But other than that, he says, with that, Sony will have to release on other platforms. What will Sony have to release on other platforms? They don't have any major multiplayer focused games in the pipeline. Their only titles are Intergalactic, Wolverine, and Sorrows. You could forget about the Marvel game. Yeah, that's going to be a huge game. So Sorrow seems to be an easier pick as a likely title coming to Windows PC. It's Wolverine Intergalactic that would have to break the mold. Yeah, because those are going to be massive games. And Marvel is coming there. The Last of Us and Spider-Man games have all come to PC, but only much later. Would either of these games be released simultaneously? No way. Sony's not going to do that. So that pretty much reads that article, and we kind of get the idea here. So you guys let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's no way in hell Sony's releasing Marvel day and date. What do you mean? They need that for their platform. Just like they didn't do Ghost of Yote, and it still hasn't been announced. And neither has Death Stranding, though Death Stranding is in some type of contract before Kojima claimed the rights to a certain extent. So, I mean, you got that type of stuff going on, but yeah, there's no way they're ever releasing their tentpole titles or their mega titles day one. Sony's never going to do that. But what they will do day one is live service. Now, if they do that, I mean, that's their decision, but I don't see them ever doing that because ratio. Let's not argue here. All right, y'all. Peace out. Keep gaming no matter what platform you're on.